Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Gateway webinar. We are so pleased to have you here. We're going to be getting started in just a minute. For now, please go ahead and use the chat function to introduce yourself and tell us where you're at in the world. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for being here. We'll be getting started in about 1 minute. Everyone for being here. I see many of you are already introducing yourselves in the chat. Please continue to do that. We're going to get started in about 30 seconds. Thank you. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Anthony Ogden, and I am with Gateway International Group. And I am joined today by several of my colleagues, including Dr. Kathy Winnie, who is the organizer of today's webinar. Hi, Kathy. Thank you so much for all you've done for pulling us and pulling this particular webinar together. It's great to be with you today. And everybody, it's great to be with you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a really packed hour, and I think you're going to be very pleased that you've registered and attended today. Again, my name is Anthony Ogden with Gateway International Group. Now, Gateway International Group is a relatively new organization. If you're not familiar with the organization, I would invite you to take a second or two to check us out online at gatewayinternational.org. But while you're there, in particular, I would direct your attention to Gateway Resources. This is a free, comprehensive portal of information, of everything from upcoming events to jobs, who got jobs, just about everything you can imagine. So do take a minute to stop in there. And while you're there, perhaps sign up for our monthly Gateway Edge newsletter. Now today, this webinar is part of a series on next generation education abroad programming. And today we have a very simple, but not so simple agenda for you today. Welcome. We're going to start with a welcome, as I'm doing now, introductions. We're going to have a very lively, I imagine very entertaining panel discussion, and there will be plenty of time for Q&A. Now, as you're already exercising your familiarity with the chat, I would encourage you to continue to do so. I see the Q&A function is also available here in today's Zoom webinar, so you can use the Q&A to pose any questions, or the chat, just whatever you're most comfortable with, because as with any webinar, we really want it to be lively and very interactive. So as much as you offer your comments, your thoughts, even your disagreements, feel free to do that. As I mentioned, we have a very interesting panel, a group of folks that I admire greatly. We have Christian Ollier from the Study Abroad Association. Glad you're here, Christian. We have Denise Wintrich from SEPA. Now, many of you know SEPA, of course, as Customized Educational Programs Abroad, but I'm not sure I've ever seen it spelled out before, Denise. So thank you for that, SEPA. And we also have Brian Schuler, professor at Hillsborough Community College. And together, this is going to be a fantastic discussion. Now, that said, before we get into our, and welcome our panelists to speak, I would love to cover a few foundational items. Now, 'tis the season. In our preparations for today's webinar, I was reminded by something I used to think about years ago when I was directing the center, an education abroad center in Tokyo. and that students would come almost as if they had a cookie cutter in their hand, and then they would apply this cookie cutter to their experiences in Japan, and they would only give any level of priority or any level of attention to what fell within that cookie cutter. And everything else, oftentimes the most fascinating aspects of Japanese culture that fell outside of that cookie cutter, they were oblivious to, maybe because they didn't recognize, maybe it was so ambiguous or so implicit that they didn't pick it up. And in some ways, I'm reminded by that today. When we're looking at international learning and engagement, we certainly don't want to be like students from years ago using a cookie cutter and understanding what we think international learning and engagement should be. Rather, over the last 50 years, at least here in the United States, we have focused on international learning and engagement as almost synonymous with education abroad, physical mobility abroad. And while that is terrific, and it will always be terrific, there's so much more that falls outside of that cookie cutter. And in fact, were many of the gifts that we know of international education to be. So with that introduction, I want to say, and very clearly, my gift to you today is this assumption, and that is a thread that will underscore everything that we're talking about over the next 55 minutes, and that is online international learning and engagement is robust, and it's here to stay, folks. We're not going to go back. I hope we won't go back to the way things were, because I'm not particularly proud of the way things were. Let's continue to look forward. Let's open up our gifts and go forward and look boldly to the new year. Now, as we do that, it's important to be reminded that international learning engagement is really a continuum. Now, many of you have seen this continuum perhaps, or some variation thereof, but it really is in continuum. And as I mentioned, most of the last 50 years, we have focused on maximizing opportunity. In other words, we make international education programming available, and for the students that are lucky enough, supported enough, they can avail themselves of those opportunities and live happily ever after. That has been our mantra for 50 years. We maximize opportunities for those who can take advantage of them. But now, if you consider much more recognition to the full continuum, we also see, for lack of better or clearer terminology, what I refer to as access education, where now we're able to use more mainstreamed technologies and other ways to engage students in online learning engagement and maximize access. And then, of course, what we've talked about for years but never have fully realized is the other end of that spectrum, and that is integrated education, where we maximize equity through curricular and campus internationalization. And by equity in this case, I really mean very simply, imagine a day when a student just registers for a course, and as part of that course, they are engaged with peers around the world, with content in their discipline of an intercultural nature. Wouldn't that just be wonderful? That it isn't just for the most privileged 14% or 2%, depending on what numbers you're using, but really is international learning and engagement. It's for all of us, and it's incumbent upon all of us to focus on graduating students, all students, with international learning, at least within their discipline and understanding its international nuances. And so we have an expanded toolkit. Now, our toolkit has been expanding. Let's think about it for a second. If we look back at the history of international education, at least in the United States, for many decades, since World War II, upwards of maybe it's up to the 1980s, mid-1980s, it was all about junior year abroad. Imagine, it was all about a young girl putting on a beret, smoking a cigarette, having a coffee in Paris, and learning a little bit about French. That was the whole goal. Get students abroad, they can learn a little bit about culture and speak a little bit of French. And then we said, hang on, we're not really being totally accessible. Maybe if we added semester programs, we'll be able to see students being able to study in places like in India, where maybe they're more reticent about studying for a whole year, or maybe where they can't earn enough credit taught in English if they don't speak the local language. So we started adding semester-length programming. And sure enough, we thought it did help to support greater diversity of participants and a greater diversity of where and what students are studying. Then back in the 90s, we said, hang on, we can even further engage faculty. Up until now, we've only been asking faculty members to be cheerleaders. If only more faculty would get involved, education abroad or international education would be better, right? And then so we started adding short-term programming. And that really did, in fact, engage more faculty, for better or for worse, engage more faculty, and it also internationalized the curriculum much more. We're seeing degree plans with international education as part of those degree plans. And then over the last 18 months, in part I'm thankful to the COVID pandemic for accelerating what was already in motion through education 4.0, or I'm sorry, the fourth industrial revolution. And that is, we started seeing more online and other variations of that programming emerge. Now, makes sense to you? But hang on a second. Does anybody have a problem with this? Now, this is where you really want to start using the chat, okay? So tell us what problems you see here. Now, here's the problem I see. At each of these phases, we kicked and screamed and hollered and saying how the world was going to come to an end if we started adding short-term programs. And now we're doing the same thing. And so I want to remind everybody as our panel gets underway that online learning is, we're fighting it in some ways. Some of us are going at it open arms. It is about intention. It's about intentional program design. If we design and deliver programs that are designed for this space, as some that you're going to hear about today, then they can be as effective with different intentional learning outcomes than other types of programs. It's the same conversation we had in the 90s when we were starting to add short-term study. And we realized only after we failed for a couple of years that we needed to design programs for 6 weeks rather than shove programs into a 6-week time frame. Now, today, of course, we're going to hear all sorts of terminology, and I'm not going to be able to resolve all of this today, but that we are using virtual or online, AR, XR, VR, all of this terminology, and sometimes using interchangeably, and most of the time we're using it wrong, or we don't even really know what the best terminology is. So as we go forward today, let's all be mindful of the terminology that we're using, and maybe we can arrive collectively at a shared space with some shared terminology. We're not going to be able to do that today. I spent about 2 hours trying to figure out the difference between online learning and virtual learning over the weekend. I came up with these definitions. I don't support them. Okay, now with that, let's turn back to our panel. I'm sorry for taking so much time there, folks. Christian Ollier with Study Abroad Association, Denise Bentrich with SEPA, and Brian Schuler with Hillsborough Community College. Now, folks, I'd like to invite you each, maybe starting with you, Christian, to maybe take the first stab at this question. And you can, if you don't mind, I invite you to share your screen if you'd like, but tell us your approach to next generation international learning and engagement. So I'm going to stop sharing and ask you if you'd like.
Hey, Tony, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Everybody, welcome. I'm so happy to be here with you today. And I assume we're all here because we love international education and excited about all of the evolution that's taken place. So what does that mean for me in Study Abroad Association? Well, we were faced with a similar challenge as everyone in international education when everything came to a stop in 2020. We wanted to use that challenge to really address some longstanding issues that we've seen in international education that we felt were big issues. Those issues are primarily focused around accessibility. Secondly, how can we build something that's a powerful promotional tool for study abroad? And three, how can we create something that can effectively internationalize curriculum in an exciting, enhanced way to allow faculty to bring global experts from around the world directly into their classroom on the regular basis. So to do that, when we started building this, we wanted to keep it immersive, interactive, but we also wanted to be able to remove all barriers of accessibility. So students who don't have enough money, students who don't have enough time, students who are physically unable to go to the location for whatever reason, times in pandemics, travel restrictions, you name it. We wanted to be able to have an interactive, immersive, global education that can be made accessible to all no matter what was going on in the world. And that is what we spent the last 2 years creating. So I want to introduce you to 360 GLE. GLE stands for 360 Global Learning Experiences. We decided to use 360 technology for the main reason that we wanted to be able to provide an interactive, immersive experience. We started with asynchronous. So all of the content through here is self-paced, asynchronous, because that's part of accessibility. If students are not able to participate in the live synchronous experience that might be between classrooms across the globe, or they're unable to go, it's not accessible to everyone. So we decided to go asynchronous, but excitingly, this is hybrid. So it can be used synchronous as well as asynchronous. And we'll get into that later. Now, this is a nice, beautiful photo here in Florence, right? We say, oh, wow, great. We've got the Duomo, Santa Maria de Fore. This is very beautiful, but where's the educational content? Let me introduce you to the hotspots. So each of these icons is a different educational plugin. So what we do is we take the 360 space, but then we interweave it with many different types of multimedia. So you have professional photos, high definition photo plugins, right? Go ahead and move everybody. I see all the Zoom chat. High definition photo plugins. You have standard videos. Let me introduce you to Dr. Francesco Restuccia. So what we do here is we work with local experts on ground in each location, PhD, advanced degrees, experts in their field. This is Dr. Francesco Restuccia. He's a research fellow at Sapienza University in Rome.
Images.
So you have standard video, high quality, everything captioning, translated when necessary, of the different monuments that we're visiting. So you're able to come back and experience these things time and time again. It's not just a one-time experience that you might have experienced if you're on ground with a what we call a physical travel program. Now we also have 360 video. 360 videos are completely immersive and interactive. And by the way, when we talk about accessibility, we wanted to create something that was accessible on all devices, meaning mobile phone, tablet, laptop, desktop, VR goggles, smartboard in the classroom, things that you can, as long as you have an internet connection, accessible on all devices. So I'll just show you quickly a 360 video for the sake of time, and we can jump forward here a little bit in it so you can see what you do. This is incredible if you're visiting archaeological sites, if you're visiting monuments, cathedrals, if you're, yeah.
Was designed by
one second.
One of the greatest architects and artists of the late Middle Ages.
Right, so I have complete control over this. You're able to look in all directions, all around, completely immersive experience, especially if you're wearing VR goggles. Now, let me come out of here. What I want to show you very quickly is the satellite map, right? So right now you're seeing Florence, and just for the sake of time, we don't have a ton. We've done 65 global locations so far. Every year's new locations, new areas of study. We want to provide a proper representation of the world with new, fresh, up-to-date content. I just want to show you how rich a scene can be, how rich a location could be. So I come here, right, and set it in front of Palazzo Vecchio, Piazza Signoria in Florence, and might say it's a beautiful square, but where's the content, right? If I go ahead and go into full screen here and then just turn on my hotspots, you can see how this location can come to life using the world as the classroom, right? Drone videos, high def photos, etc., text boxes, quizzes, you name it, right? So this is very good. And last thing to show you here, because I don't want to go over my time, this is the Geo Located Satellite Map. So the Geo Located Satellite Map allows you to go all the way down to Street View where we are right now, Piazza Signoria, and you can navigate to locations through the map. So for students who have never been in Florence, have never been here, they can actually see where this is in the world and really build that deeper geographical connection. So this is where we're just getting started. We've done 9 countries, 65 locations, over 150 multidisciplinary topics. It's very exciting times, and we're just scratching the surface. So this is one approach to keeping global education alive and evolving. Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you very much, Christian. I have to tell you, I have a million questions for you, but we're going to move on and come back, and maybe we can get to that in discussion. That's really terrific stuff you're doing. Let's go over to Denise now. Denise, welcome back. Denise is with us again from CPUB. Denise?
Thank you very much, Tony. I'm sorry for the internet problems here. I hope I will stay now. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here today. Or well, for me, it's almost tonight because I'm based in Germany and yeah, it's already dark here. So we at SIPA and the SIPA Foundation are mostly known for our faculty-led programs to Europe in our study center in Strasbourg, France, that you can also see here in my background, where we offer semester programs. However, with the start of the pandemic, we have started thinking about virtual international education solution, first, mainly out of necessity as international travel was no longer possible. But while working with very different virtual learning opportunities, we quickly realized that there are many advantages that will make those types of programs stay and become an essential part of education abroad in the 21st century. Virtual or online international sessions can be designed in so many different ways and thereby help to enrich the internationalization of any course or institution. What is very important though, and this is one of my key messages that I would like to share with you, what is very important is to design virtual content that exactly meets your needs for a course or for the internationalization goals at the university. There is not just one way to run a virtual or online program and you have to adjust your course to make the program fit in. No, it's exactly the other way around. We have to adjust the online modules and virtual learning in a way that it supports your course and your learning goals. We have tried very different models and approaches in the past 2 years, and I would like to quickly introduce some of them to you to give examples how virtual learning can look like. So we had different embedded international experiences, meaning virtual international education was integrated into existing on-campus or online courses to give them an international perspective. For example, we supported a semester course on intercultural communication at Marymount University with some international presentation and workshops from Europe. They had, for example, a workshop on understanding culture, during which cultural differences and similarities between Germany and the US have been discussed in a peer-to-peer activity with German students. They also had a live Zoom session with the delivery leader at the World Health Organization who talked to the students about healthcare and crisis response in Europe with a focus on the current COVID-19 pandemic. So these sessions have been integrated in their regular semester course and students learned about a European perspective of the topics they've been discussing during their classes. Another approach was the international content we created for an online MBA program at Louisiana State University. They need asynchronous content for their platform. So we interviewed really high caliber speakers from different industries, for example, industry leaders or senior level executives, and then we produced videos that the students could watch. Another possibility to internationalize your entire institution and not only one specific course is to offer cross-curricular events such as intercultural virtual symposia or expert presentations, which are open for all students at the institution. We are running such a series of events with the University of the Incarnate Word for more than 1 year now, and the sessions are always very well attended. And the advantage of this model is that you can reach many students with little expenses. The last column listed here, virtual internship, is the virtual program type that we consider most relevant for the future. We have, for example, already run 3 editions of the Global Virtual Internship Program in cooperation with EDU Africa, Campus B, and the Asia Institute as the Global Learning Collective. During this program, students from different universities and colleges from the US and Canada work together in teams with students from Africa, Europe, Asia, and South America on projects by real host companies from these continents, focusing on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Besides the project work, students have group sessions to learn about intercultural communication, teamwork, and have cultural engagement sessions. And I personally take care of these students that are working with the European host company, and it is so rewarding to see the students develop and grow during these weeks. They not only get work experience, but also acquire intercultural skills and personal skills, which are so helpful for their career readiness. This program is also a great example to show a big advantage of virtual learning. Such global programs which bring together so many different nationalities would not be possible in a traditional on-site format, at least not as long as financial restrictions exist. And students really have to collaborate with students from other nationalities and deal with those cultural differences firsthand instead of only observing them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Denise. I've had the pleasure of working with SEPA over the years, and it's just terrific to see how SEPA is adapting to this new generation of international learning. Thank you for that. Now, let's turn over. By the way, I just noticed here in the chat, based on what Denise has talked about, Gateway just opened up a content page on understanding the differences between on-site and remote internship. So follow that link if you're interested in reading a little bit more in depth about what Denise here is talking about. Now let's turn over to Professor Schuler from Hillsborough Community College. I'm just looking forward to hearing everything you have to say, sir.
Thank you very much, Tony. And by the way, I am one of the products of the junior summer abroad. That was what everybody just assumed that you did, if you could. I saved up for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years to be able to do that. But it wasn't economically feasible for many people. And your point is well taken. Hello, everybody. I'm Brian Schuler. I'm a humanities professor at Hillsborough Community College. And I want to talk to you about what I've been doing and what I have done in the past. And it's very different than what happened to me live this semester with the help of the GLE 360. So I'm going to take a look at what I have here, and I want to share it. Okay, so I taught just a normal introduction to humanities. I've been doing this for many, many years. And of course, we all bring in our videos and we play the music, et cetera, and show images of different art, two-dimensional art, sculpture, architecture. But this year was different. I decided to use the SAA's 360 GLE, and I would send my students on a trip every weekend, just like I would if I was in a location where we lecture Monday through Friday, and then we go on a trip on the weekends. And I would send them away with questions. I would also tell them, because I knew all the sites, where to go to get the cheapest spaghetti dinners, where to get some fresh water from a 2,000-year-old fountain, which bus to take down the Appia Antica, etc. I was getting involved in it. The students would come back, we would compare what we had talked about in the lecture and what they had seen, and they were having a great time as they visited Florence, Rome a couple different times, Pompeii, and Athens. Then I said, all right, now your job is to go out and be a tour guide, and I want you to pick a spot that we didn't see along the way, and I want you to bring it into the class and talk about it. Well, that was really nice. I didn't give them a whole lot of information other than I want a dozen good slides. You pick the place, you pick how you're going to present, go for it. Well, this is what happened. They brought back historical data and timelines that I didn't expect, didn't tell them to do, geographic positioning, contextual analysis, architectural analysis, including cutaway designs, sculptural analysis, two-dimensional art analysis. I was blown away. And I said to them, who told you to do this? Where did you learn all of this? And they said, oh, well, you know, we've been watching the videos that you had us go on, and we've been taking a trip. And so we learned from the GLE, how to make a presentation, especially the contextual analysis really blew me away. And all of these, drone photos from above, et cetera. And so some of them included just giving you a smattering of what was presented, the Temple of Vesta by Emma, the Aurelian Walls by Daniela. And by the way, the photographs on, this is just their cover piece. The entire presentations were all off the chart. And these are freshmen and sophomore college students. Moya did the Gates of Paradise that we saw earlier. Sophie did the Basilica, nice work. And Laura was working on one of the early hospitals, the Trevi Fountain, beautiful images throughout. And we had the Castillo. This was really a nice one. Aldo really talked about the statues. Anna talked about the palace and went through it with all kinds of, beautiful images. And Bethsaida did one on, what was it? Oh, okay, right. This was a house down on the Tiber. She just chose to do that. And we ended up with the Doge's Palace by Nathan. just to give you an example of what was going on there. And by the way, at the end of the semester, I asked them which one of them thought that this was reality. 50% of the students said they actually experienced the study abroad. Reality. I use the word reality. I said, what about surreal realities, surreal experience? 25% raised their hand. I said, how many of you actually believe you went on a study abroad this semester? 100% of the class raised their hand. Now, 100% versus 2% is a big difference. And this all happened organically. I gave up my lectures. I started to walk up to the front and work with the tour guides and talk through it. And I would say, hey, I would have talked about this if we'd been on the street. I would have talked about this. Thanks for bringing this to our attention. And so we just threw away the old syllabus and we discovered a whole new way of learning, the way we have always wanted to learn. It was fantastic. Thanks, Tony.
Wow, very impressive indeed. I look forward now to some of the questions and discussion that we're going to be able to have. This is really great, all three of you. Thank you so very much. Now I'm sharing my screen once again to bring in our participants. In preparation for today, we thought we might have quite a critical discussion today about these types of learning. And so what we want to do briefly is talk a little bit about what is working with online learning engagement, what isn't working, and then talk about the role of international offices in promoting next generation international learning. So I want to jump in. I'm not going to share my screen through all of this. I think it's good just to see your faces large here on my screen. I really want to talk about what is working. And now these are legitimate questions, and we're going to go quickly through these, given that we only have a half an hour now. And the first question I really want to talk about, or the first area really, is about diversity. Finally, in international higher education, we're talking with real intention now about creating, enhancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in international education. We've been talking about this since 1990 at the most memorable conference I went to with CIE some years ago. Now we're really talking about it, putting our, I think, action into place. Now that said, many people are saying these types of programs are responding to more diverse learners, not necessarily diversity itself, but lifelong learners and other forms of diversity. Is that true? What do you think? Is it really working?
Tony, I teach at a HSI, Hispanic Serving Institution. Well over 30% of our population is Hispanic and Latino. And again, 100% of my students went on a study abroad this semester. They affirmed that they had, and I have a very diverse group of students, not only of cultural background, but of age background.
Yes, I can also, sorry.
Go ahead, excuse me.
Yes, I can also say that in our programs, I've seen all types of students. I've worked with college students, with university students, with students that have a full-time job besides their studies, with students that are concentrating on studies, students with a family or child, students taking a second career. So virtual education really means that it's not longer a privilege for the rich people, but that it can help that the great mass of students can get connected to the world.
Well, let me ask you, Denise, are we then setting up a situation where the rich kids can actually go to Italy and everybody else can go online?
Not yet, because of the pandemic. So we are just starting to bring students back on site, but we are working for the future. We are already working on those hybrid solutions, that we have a course that is taught, and then we bring some presenters in as pre-sessions before the faculty-led on-site part, and then the program happens, and it's also possible to join them virtually. So we set up the Zoom conference for those students who cannot travel physically. And then all the students and the course together back at their university or at their college, and we do a wrap-up session and we stay in contact. And yeah, so we are working on this type of model with some colleges and universities, but it has not yet taken place. So the first program will hopefully start in May.
Tony, we took if I may, we took kind of an alternative approach. So since January 2021, we've had a few thousand students as well as faculty who have gone through the 360 GLE, everything from concurrent dual credit high school students to college, university, master degree students to continuing education, continuing learning. So it's been completely diverse. The faculty feedback, especially with faculty who teach cultural studies courses each semester and are implementing it. And so we've never had such a diverse student population before. And we wanted to take that a step further because it was only 1 year of collecting data, listening, and constantly evolving, right? We're constantly listening. So we decided to do a focus group during IEW, and 99% of the students, and this was a focus group with 2 different groups, students who had been abroad before and students who had never been abroad before. And 99% of the students who had never been abroad before said that the experience inspired them to want to study abroad, be it either a faculty directed program or a semester abroad. So I think getting people off the fence is that group of students that are kind of like, I'm not sure if it's for me. I think it's very exciting, what everybody's doing in the virtual space, because we're only going to see an increase in participation with physical, educational travel.
Christian, I'm just going to point one hole in this comment, if you don't mind. And that
Please.
is, for years, we used to say, oh, if they study abroad on a short-term program, then they may study abroad. It will increase their likelihood, some percentage of participating on a semester or year-length program. I hated those arguments, and I made them myself over the years. And the reason I didn't like them is because it was automatically putting one type of program in as a scaffold to something else, rather than seeing that program designed for on its own set of legs, essentially. Meaning using these programs for a particular outcome. Secondarily, focus on the modality, focus on the program and what it's designed for, and then students will respond for that, right? Let me ask you, Professor Schuler, I mentioned earlier that over the decades, we have seen faculty members as cheerleaders, and if they would get on board, and then international education would be so much better and stronger for it. And then, of course, what happened over the last 2 decades, certainly here in the United States, is that more and more faculty members did get on board, and they got on board with and regarding to faculty-directed cohort-based programming, kind of like what you've arranged. But now here we are in a new era. Many faculty members, like all of us, struggled at the outset of the COVID about moving their courses online, and we've learned a lot since then. But are we going to, as we see other types of modalities, like what we learned today from SEPA and Study Abroad Association, and these other types of COIL type of programs and so forth, are we going to struggle, or how can we approach faculty members to see if they will engage in this type of learning?
Well, I'll tell you what, and I wanted to address, Marty had written something in the chat, too early to judge. Marty, I had to change my point of view. Tony, I had to change my point of view. And it all started the day that I asked my 22-year-old Aiden if he had ever met his girlfriend, who he talks about, if he had ever met her live, not just online. He looked at me, he was completely incensed, and he said, I meet her every day. I've known her for a long time, and yes, we do many things together, and we go out together. That's why it drove me to ask the question to my students, is this reality? And in their world, it is reality. And we who did our junior year abroad, who have done other traditional, can we say, study abroad, we're going to have to accept the fact that reality is where you live. Reality is where you play your games. Reality is where you meet your friends. Reality is where you shop. And if COVID has taught us nothing, we can do all of those things at home, including do our work. That's our reality. Some of us are holding back on accepting the reality, and we just have to get over the idea of just virtual. We have to get over the idea of substitute. This is travel in the 21st century. Wait till we get the holograms coming, and they're coming up really fast too. So Tony, I really see this is not just something that we have to address. We have to change our own perspective to understand our young students' perspectives, and they are different than ours.
Thank you for that. I had the chance to visit with a group of students yesterday, and I asked them, are you tired? Because I keep hearing from international educators saying that students are exhausted. All of us are exhausted with virtual Zoom types calls and other types of online learning. And one of the students quipped right away, and he said, basically, get on board or die. I was really surprised by that. He said, this is the wave of the future. We have to learn and be able to maximize and enhance that learning. Let me ask you, Christian, a question. And this stems from a question in the chat from Kristen about moving from Google Maps to other forms of engagement. And this was a question that's been on my mind since your opening comment earlier. And that is much of what you showed us, in keeping in mind, of course, that time was limited. I'm sure there's much more to it. But could it be argued, in the spirit of what's not working, that this type of programming is all about built culture? I mean, much of what you presented was showing the architecture of some Italian cities. Can we go beyond built culture in this type of space?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. So obviously in the short demo, we had one opportunity to show you an inside look, right? The reason I wanted to show that scene in particular is that you can use the world around you as the classroom, and you can bring that to life, and you can capture all of that. But for example, what we like to do in many of the other locations, in our science units, for example, if you're in Costa Rica and you're with the Bribri indigenous community, and we're discussing sociology or anthropology, for example, and you're actually in the village where this community lives, and you're seeing the local life in a way that you would never have access to unless you actually go there and you trek for a few days to get into the jungle and you visit this location, then you're able to have person-to-person connections, especially when you use this as the foundation, but then you accompany it with live streaming sessions like we're having now. So the way that I see it is build a foundation that's accessible to everyone. From there, stem in different directions, go to synchronous now, live sessions, open question, Q&A, open discussions, and then take it a step further and have that in-person experience, what we call hybrid programs. So I think that there's many different layers, but to really have the accessibility for everyone, I think that you need to start with the asynchronous, because that is accessible to everyone, because it's self-paced. Then from there, infuse synchronous, and then from there, have physical travel if everything permits. So yeah, I think that there's so many different things you can do, from being inside of homestays with families to, you could take a scene with 5 people sitting around a table, and then each of them has their own story to tell. So the options are truly endless of what you can do. So it's our job to get creative and to listen to faculty and to listen to educators, and then bring that to life.
Thank you for that, Kristen. I have to be honest, I've been to my share of online cocktail hours. Let me pick up on a question that came into the chat, just a quick add-on question for you. And that is, what about accessibility for visually impaired students?
Yeah, this is a great question. And this is something that we came across when going through our VPAT. So you have auditory, right? So you can have an automatic playlist of videos where all the content is delivered auditory, right? And then additionally, for students who are hearing impaired, you have your captioning and your text. Now, if you have students who are visually and hearing impaired, this is something that we're trying to overcome. This is very challenging, right? So physical touch But we don't have that capability, at least on our side, through our means of technology. But for students who are visually impaired, auditory playlist, they can go through all the scenes, all the units, they can listen. Students who are hearing impaired, all the videos have captioning, so they're able to participate.
Thank you very much for that. Denise, let me turn to you with a quick question. SEPA has been around for a while, and I said earlier, I've had the pleasure of working with Uli and your colleagues there at SEPA, and I've always been so very, very impressed. You take program design very seriously at SEPA, and I've been pleased by seeing that. But I really wonder now about assessment. Marty Tillman puts in the chat, it's too early to tell about X, Y, and Z, and he's very right, because we haven't really seen many generalizable research or outcomes-based studies on what students are learning, and how then can we further enhance through various pedagogical interventions, how can we further enhance learning? What have you seen out and about, whether it's SEPA or elsewhere, about how to measure and assess student learning in this space?
Well, we don't have any studies either. We have, but we have run so many programs, so we could watch students, and with those virtual experiences, a great advantage for us in the office is that we are with the students, we are part of the experience, we can experience what they experience. So compared to on-site programs, we are much more involved, and we can see how they react, we can see what they do, what they deliver, and that, like I said before, that always surprises us in a positive way, because when we had set expectations and we set them quite high, it always happened that students delivered more than we expected. And I think that's the effect, because in the virtual space, it's not the traditional learning that there is one person speaking and the students sit there and listen, but we work more with projects and with their own ideas, and there are not too many rules how it has to work, but we give them the opportunity to work together how they want and what they consider as relevant, and those bring much better results than what we have seen before.
Anybody else want to comment on that question?
Yeah, I do. To be quite honest with you, again, I didn't know what to expect after having the students spend half of the semester traveling, and then giving me feedback on the travel through their own PowerPoints. Again, I was totally blown away. The content that they used, the images that they used, the understanding, all came from observing how to properly give a tour through the 360 GLE. And then I use that as a way for measuring for the future, and for measuring my response to them in terms of a grade. I also had the chairman of the honors program come and observe and watch what they were doing. And I came to her and said, I'm completely changing the syllabus in this course in the fall. The old one isn't anything like the new one, and I want to completely redo it with new kinds of evaluations, new experiences, and it's all going to be based on student travel. And this is how we spoke about it, was the students would be traveling and studying abroad. And by the way, she mentioned the fact of what would you think if we had Francisco, the tour guide in Florence, come and visit. And the students were extremely excited to meet him, quote unquote, face to face. And we're talking about a Zoom meeting, but there was no comment about we'd love to meet him on Zoom. They said they wanted to meet him face to face and spend time with him. So things have really changed there. It's just amazing what I've experienced and how I'm going to have to change my evaluations.
Well, I'm actually very pleased to hear that, Professor Schuler. As I alluded to earlier, I think as many of us have noted earlier on at the outset of the pandemic, we were also hurriedly moving things online, courses and other types of programming that weren't designed for online delivery. And then we were shouldn't have been surprised when it didn't work. And now your colleagues, you and your colleagues and others are now intentionally reconfiguring for that space, right? So that's really terrific to see. One of the concerns I have had over the last, in recent weeks is that we have focused so much time and energy on modalities and not yet enough attention on pedagogy. So I'm really pleased to hear you mention that. Let's turn to another question. Gosh, it's been a tough 2 years for a lot of us around the world. Optimistically, it's been, I can see many opportunities coming along, but it's been tough. But as we make this shift, what do you folks see, and anybody can answer here, what do you see as the role of education abroad offices going forward in advancing internet education abroad for a new era of students or a new era of learners, actually?
Yeah, Tony, I can lead with that one. And I think that relates to Kathy's question earlier. By the way, Kathy, sorry, I just saw that in the chat. I finally had the time to go through and see the previous question. I think that, at least with our experience, right, our primary contacts at each institution had been international education offices, right, global education of some sort. So that was our starting point. I feel that a lot of study abroad directors, people in those positions at the institutions were very cautious of virtual in the beginning. And I can understand that because they've been used to physical travel for so long. So anything new, especially coming on that fast, that quickly, and like as one of our guests mentioned earlier, hasn't had that much research or data collected. You know, they were like, hold on, we don't want to jump in directly and just go virtual. As well as, could virtual replace our existence and what we do in our offices? So I think that over the past 20 or so months, what I've seen is that a lot of study abroad offices have been very hesitant to accept virtual. Others have been very receptive and said, hey, let's go, let's experiment, let's make this happen. So to answer your question, what do I see as the responsibility of study abroad offices moving forward? I think that we should experiment with as much as possible. I don't think that there's one way that's better than another way. I think the more, the better, because everything is going to connect with a different individual in a different way. So if you like COIL, if you like, or whatever you want to call it, virtual exchange, you like student to student, classroom to classroom, faculty to faculty, beautiful, that's great. But that's a lot of work for faculty. Not all faculty are on board with that. If you only like physical, or you do like, that's great as well, because we understand immersive, experiential, that's excellent. Or why not sample with virtual internships? Why not sample with what SEPA is doing, what Study Abroad Association is doing? The more options, the more variety, the better. And that's what I would encourage study abroad directors or professionals in the field to do moving forward, is to experiment with as much as possible, because you are going to find it connects with certain individuals in a deeper way. And the more global sharing that we can provide, the better it is for everyone. So that's my take on that.
Christian, just a point of order. I didn't tell you about this, but the course that I'm going to be using, the GLE 360 in the spring, will also include a COIL working with students at University of Paris in Saclay. So they're going to be working with other students, and they're going to be traveling.
Yeah, I totally agree with Christian and Brian, and I would like to add that, in my opinion, the aim of international education should be to prepare the students for international work they will be doing in the future. So in the past, students needed to be prepared to travel and to have business meetings abroad and to get oriented in different cities and to adapt to the culture in a way that they could do business there. But the new work situation is less traveling, but it's working in international teams over time zones with technology. And I think that points out why virtual education is super important, because that's what they need to learn to work successfully in the future.
You know, this is a very interesting discussion, and I can almost feel the anxiety levels rising among our colleagues who are in 1 or 2 person offices. When you say experiment with everything, as much as I agree with that, I find that I might qualify by saying, Christian, if I may, that you're right. Denise, Brian, you're right. However, I would say it's best to understand the full spectrum and then strategically pull down in that spectrum what would best work within your capacity and at your institutional mission, and align it with that. Because no institution is going to offer everything.
Right.
And maybe they only have the capacity to offer one thing, which actually leads me to my final question for you in the couple minutes that we have left. And that is, I have heard from many of my colleagues out and about, and they're probably looking at that continuum and thinking, what can I pull down? What can I pull down? And they're saying, oh my gosh, it is so intimidating. There are so many players. You got Study Abroad Association, you have SEPA, you have some of the organizations that are represented by the participants here in the room today. How do you know what to do? How can you figure this out?
I'm the guinea pig at my college, Tony. I started with IREX Sustainability Challenge. I continue to work with that. I'm also working with Gazelle International to work with the students in Paris. And I've been working with Christian for the past year and a half on Study Abroad Association. And so I'm working in 3 different programs simultaneously because I believe in it, because I know this is the future, because there are so many things to offer. And if we don't get the students realizing how to work internationally with each other, that's going to be a real problem, because the future of business is online and with Zooming and Teams, and they need to know how to work with each other online. And so I believe in this, and I believe that I'm helping my students. So I'm the guy that's trying them all out.
Well, good on you. Thank you very much. Actually, Christian, you already answered my question ahead of me even asking it. And that is, find those partners who can help you partner with you, right?
Right.
By taking some of the work off or help replace to be an extension of your office rather than as just a recipient of students.
Could I
Anything else, Ed?
go ahead, Tony? Sorry, I was going to ask
No,
if I could answer Kristen's question.
Please.
So I'll just give you our take on funding. This was the first thing that we thought about when we started to go down this path nearly 2 years ago. Was, are students going to pay for virtual study abroad, or whatever we want to call it, right? And my initial take was absolutely not. I don't think students are going to pay to have these types of experiences. And so what we did is we made a subscription model. So the subscription model goes along with accessibility. The school pays for a subscription. Every single student and faculty at the institution has unlimited access, unlimited students, right? So that was our step. How do they fund it? Everything you can imagine, from the President's Foundation, the Global Education Office, the library, departmental budgets, internal grants, so many special student activities. So many different departments work together to scrape in a little bit of money to be able to pay for the institution subscription. And that's how they've been able to fund this. So yeah, that's how we did it. That's one way that was our strategy.
Well, thank you for adding that. That's a good point to end on. I would say it's not also just about funding. It's also about the funding model, being able to be able to pay, whether you pay from one fund or another for students. So thank you all very much. I'm pretty sure Dr. Kathy Winnie will never ask me to step in and moderate a panel again, but I'm certainly glad I had the opportunity to do that today. Professor Schuler, thank you so very much, and for all the work that you are doing there in Hillsborough. And of course, to Denise at SEPA. Good folks over at SEPA, folks, check them out. I'd love to visit them someday. And look at that castle behind there, Denise. That's a real place, folks. Our students can study there. And Christian, thank you so much for taking us all around the world in just a matter of a few minutes. And Kathy's, and you see here, folks, their email addresses are here. I encourage you to reach out to them, because I imagine, like me, you have many more questions and things that you'd like to chat about and learn about. So over to you, Kathy.
I just wanted to say a few words about the next session, which will be on January 25th. We have not yet announced the panelists, but we are working on a set of panelists who are practitioners in the area of community-based learning, both virtual and, of course, in person. Throughout the pandemic, there has been ongoing in-person community service going on in the US, especially, as well as abroad. So making a commitment to fair trade practices or community-based learning is another new push in our field, and one which changes a lot of questions if you are determined for inclusion and access and thinking about finances for students. And it includes what I wanted to say about all these university questions. How do you fund it? How do you start? How do you network? How do you advocate? The universities are changing. The networks for education abroad are changing at universities. And so if you're not already working across the silos of your small or large university, no matter how poor or how rich, you're not on the wave of the future. You have to break down the barriers, because education abroad does not belong, global learning does not belong to one office anymore, if it ever did. So come join us in January, yet another very important aspect of global learning. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, everyone. The panelists, you've been wonderful. And thank you to the audience for your questions.